Welcome to the Open Mic Podcast Show with Mike Midgley.
Hey, and welcome to the Open Mic Podcast. On today's episode, we're getting started fast out of the gate in 2020. We're going to be covering what is becoming more and more important in any business entrepreneur's mindset, or it should be, and that is the topic of storytelling. Today's influencer guest is Michael de Groot from Staying Alive UK, and Michael is based out of Stourport-on-Severn in Worcester here in the UK. So welcome to the show, Michael. It's great to have you here, and thanks for taking the time out of your busy diary at the start of the year.
Thank you, Mike. I'm really excited to come on your podcast. And by the way, I love your title, The Open Mic. I think that's so clever. I'm glad we connected on LinkedIn some weeks ago and that we managed to get together on this. Appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure, and I'm certainly looking forward to it because, you know, for the listeners as well, when you're out there, you know, we've all got New Year's resolutions, whether we keep some or we don't. We go to the gym, we stop going to the gym, we've got to set us goals, do we hit them all? It doesn't really matter. But one thing that seems to be, you know, ever present in his lives, whether it's commercially in business, whether it's, you know, in his personal lives, is stories. And, you know, especially as we move forward into marketing, you know, and we move into growing as businesses and moving forward. You know, we've entered into a new decade. It's the start of, 2020, and we talk about this decade of opportunity. You know, we're not going to get political in the show or religious on the show. We just don't do that. But, you know, we're with the new government. We're looking at 10 years of opportunity. It's the decade of opportunity. And, you know, storytelling is such a big part of that. If you're not aware of it, we've got a super expert here who's going to share, you know, a little, you know, more than a little, a lot of strategies with you, how to get started, do something different, how to stand out. And, you know, if you want to connect with Michael, you can do that. Head over to his website at stayingaliveuk.com. Michael also runs an amazing podcast as well. So you can just put the extensions /podcast at the end of that domain. If you're driving or listen to this on any of the apps, don't worry, we'll put it in the show links. You can pick that up when it's safe to do so. You can check out Michael at the Twitter as well, at Staying Alive UK, or as I said, you know, we connected on LinkedIn, you know, it's that place. So check out linkedin.com/IN/Staying Alive UK. So first of all, you may not think this, and actually me working in the Netherlands in my business as well, I work with a client over in the Netherlands. From Michael's accent, I have to say, I didn't have you down as a native of the Netherlands. I know you've been in the UK a good while, but tell us about the original journey from the Netherlands, Michael, all the way to Stourport-on-Severn, you know, in the UK. How did that happen?
Well, let me first of all get the name pronunciation alternatives for people.
Yeah.
So it's in the UK, we had to change the surname to de Groot. Yeah. Because no one could say de Groot.
De Groot, yeah.
Yeah, and de Groot is because of the g, the Scots can say it, but the English people can't, unfortunately. So when my father, who was his fault basically, and I'll just tell you because, of course, I'm a storyteller, so a tiny little story about that.
Please do.
So we lived for a period of time. My father worked for the Bank of America, and he was assistant vice president or some big title, and he was posted to a place called Suriname at the top of South America, in between British and French Guiana.
Wow.
And it used to be a Dutch colony. It no longer is. It wasn't when we went there anyway, but there was a bank there that was failing, and he had to go and rescue it, which he did do. And so we lived there for about 2.5, 3 years, from the age kind of early teens. And we came back to the Netherlands when we were about 15, 16. And then my father we had to kind of reconnect the schooling and all of that, which was really tough, I have to say. And then he was being asked to get posted, and he was given 2 options, right? Option number 1 was London. Option number 2 was the US Virgin Islands, right? Now, my mother, so my father was a Dutchman. My mother was Anglo-Indian. Now, what does that mean? Well, she was born in India, but had a very English upbringing and spoke English like the Queen. Yeah. Not quite as posh, but she spoke proper English, no Indian accent at all. And so she moved to Europe to marry my father, obviously. And she was, I mean, we were brought up kind of dual nationality already in the Netherlands, because my mother was very pro-English everything. And, you know, we had Sunday morning was like English breakfast, you know, it wasn't kind of Dutch breakfast, which is very different. Anyway, so of course, she had to choose. And she chose London, of course.
Yeah.
And I've never forgiven her, because I have been to the US Virgin Islands since then. And it's an amazing place, you know. So that got us to the UK. And I've been here, apart from a short stint in Ireland for about 2.5 years, I've been in the UK for like, you know, 40 odd years.
Yeah.
And I'm pleased to say I have applied for my permanent residence and I got accepted, obviously.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But the strange thing was, in 1978, my father actually got all of us a permanent residence permit. And would you believe it? I know we weren't going to be political, but even with Brexit, they discounted it.
Wow.
They said, no, you've got to reapply.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Anyway.
And the contributions that you've made to the government and the tax system and the economy,
Absolutely,
it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I only joke when I say we don't talk political or religion.
No.
We will dip into it in and out where necessary, but, you know, obviously we try and be a neutral show, of course, to try and appease
talk
everybody.
About the first week into 2020, there are a lot of stories there, aren't there?
There are. But yeah, we'll venture into that as much or as little as we need to do, for sure. But that's a great story. And, you know, obviously, you know, if you look, there's a great video on YouTube, and I was introduced to it by my client who I work with in Eindhoven in the Netherlands.
The Light City.
Yeah, absolutely. And Philips everywhere. Yeah, Philips. And even though and what I didn't realize till we got there, we're big football fans, as you know, the listeners are, we're big Evertonians. But we did a tour of the PSV stadium, and Mariah, who took us out there, she was fantastic. She took us there. And I didn't actually know, for you football fans out there, that PSV Eindhoven is actually translates, and Michael will probably correct me slightly here, but it's Philips Sports Union, and it was the Philips workers who started the club on a like a Sunday League park in the 1900s or something, 1913 or something.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so PSV stands for Philips Sports Union, and Michael, you can be better at translating Dutch than I am. I'm learning Dutch very, very slowly with Mariah.
Are you?
Yeah, but union, that's what, I'm not quite sure why that translates to a V. But...
I have no idea, Mike, because, you know, my Dutch is so bad now. It takes me, I mean, I went to the Netherlands in September, and it takes me about 3 days before
just
it all
to get
comes
back
back
into it.
It's dreadful. It's definitely not my first language anymore. It's
absolutely. But yeah, so it's fabulous. It's a lovely country, and I started saying there's a video on YouTube, and it says, what is the difference between the Holland and the Netherlands? Of course, there's a number of providences, and the reason why I raise it is because you mentioned about the southern sort of South American connection. Obviously, there's a lot of Dutch colonies in and around there, isn't there?
Yes,
Aruba,
Caribbean,
Aruba and people like that, and things like that. And it's interesting. So, but no, that's great, and we're pleased to have you in the UK. There's a lot of value there for sure.
Thank you.
And obviously, you're running your own entrepreneurial business now, Staying Alive. Tell us a little bit more about, a quick summary of what Staying Alive does for the listeners.
So there's a few different legs. Well, there's 3 legs to Staying Alive UK, and the biggest part is creating animations, right? Essentially, the majority is whiteboard animations, but there's a tiny bit of kind of 2D animation in there as well. And I've chosen that medium to help businesses explain their stories better, like a short little cartoon. And we can talk about all the different reasons why that works, because it touches different areas of our kind of neurolinguistics, so you've got the kind of images happening, the visual part going on, you've got the auditory part going on, and then the kinesthetic, the kind of feeling that you get from watching something in a short, very, very short video clip. So that's one part of the business. The second part of the business is kind of storytelling, teaching people about storytelling. So workshops to say, what does it actually mean? You know, how do you get started? Forget the video bit because maybe you can't afford it or you don't want to do that. But then how do you show up when you are speaking to clients, to colleagues, and using storytelling to get your message across?
Yeah, that's great.
And then the third part, of course, is podcasting, which I started because when I ventured into kind of storytelling, I wanted to give something back to people out there to say, well, if you listen to these people who've started on a business journey and hear their whole kind of, you know, literally from birth, schooling to their career and then gone into business, other people may learn from that. Absolutely. And go, actually, I can do that. I can listen to him, to her. They've done it. Why couldn't I do it? So allowing people that are fed up of the corporate rat race and the, you know, being just numbers, wanting to get into business on their own, start their own small business, inspire them effectively.
Absolutely. And you know,
so those are the kind of three areas.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. Sorry, I was just saying that the podcasting side of it, you know, both as podcasters, there's like that mutual respect, and to me, I class it very much like a public service. You know, it's giving back, it's introducing the listeners to, you know, quality, informative guests who have got value to add. And I don't think, you know, for anybody who actually wanting to start a podcast in 2020, you can shoot us a message or drop the hashtag the open mic, and we'll send you some resources to get started or help you with that or whatever you need. But I don't think people realize how much effort, commitment that it actually takes to what I call do it right. And we still learn every day, and we're improving the show. We're in season 5 now. And if you listen to the first 10 shows, Michael, they suck. They really are bad. And originally, I was going to take them down and start at episode 11 as episode 1. Right. But I thought, you know what? No, I'm going to leave it up because that shows the progression, shows the commitment, the dedication.
Definitely.
But if you are doing it, you know, all I would say is do it right. If you're unsure how to do that, drop me a message, use the hashtag the open mic. More than happy to help you, send you some free resources, give you some tips, and, you know, help you shortcut some of the errors that, you know, Michael and myself have probably made and, you know, get you on your way. But it's a great medium. And again, you know, you can link stories into that. But no, I appreciate that. And you mentioned earlier about things like the cartoons and, you know, for businesses to help tell the stories. I understand that you're thinking about moving that into more of a VR experience as well. So just tell us a little bit about what that is. If you're not sure, you know, virtual reality, of course. But, you know, tell us, you know, what's the thought process behind that? What are you hoping to bring? Why VR? And what could, you know, a potential customer expect with that type of experience?
So this is definitely kind of future gazing that I'm doing, Mike. So virtual reality, there's 2 kind of main areas where, you know, alternative realities are showing up. There's virtual reality, which means you've got to wear something on your head. And there's augmented reality, which is the area really where I want to go into, which is where you take a device and you point it to somewhere in the room and you can see that individual item kind of floating in the room. And what happened was I was watching an Apple keynote speech when they showed their augmented reality solution on their devices on stage, and they had this little platform like a table, and they pointed an iPad at it, and on the iPad you saw a whole scene, a game. This was a game, a whole scene unfolding. Wow. And there were characters running on the table, jumping off the table. And I went, this is mad. This is crazy. Now, but I paid attention because Apple have got something like, I don't know, 1 billion devices installed around the world.
Yes.
Right? So no one needs to get a headset. All you do is take your device and point it into the room. Now, don't get me wrong. You know, the tech people are already talking about the fact that we will not have any handsets anymore in the next 10 years, you know. So what are they going to be? Glasses? Our existing glasses with a panel on it? Who knows what it's going to be?
It's going to evolve for sure, isn't it?
It's going to be very different. Now, all these predictions have been made before. You know, Mark Zuckerberg backed the kind of headset variety, but who knows where it's going to go. But I want to develop something on augmented reality.
Yeah.
So imagine, this is kind of future game. I have no idea what it's going to look like yet. But
the great thing, Michael, though, there is, as an entrepreneur, it's on your plate. You're ahead of the curve. Well, you maybe not ahead of Apple, but who is, But no, the point I'm saying is you're recognizing things. And, part of our show, the open mic is an entrepreneur's view on growth strategies. But more importantly, because that's subjective. What is growth? What cycle are you in your business? But ultimately, it's about how to bridge the gap between idea and implementation. And credit to Michael here for the listeners. And, it doesn't matter whether you're in mechanical or service-based business, professional sports, or anything as a listener. It doesn't really matter. The key factor is Michael's in the storytelling business and much more, of course. That's just more summarized. And he's already keeping one eye on the future, and he's recognizing how that could be transferred and brought into his own business. And what I love about the honesty of Michael there is he's no idea how that's going to play out yet, but it doesn't really matter, because what you don't want to be as an entrepreneur, and this is not me lecturing you or anything like that, guys, my style by now, but ultimately what you don't want to be doing is saying, hey, my competitors brought this new thing out, we better go and follow and copy. That's not going to do. Now, you don't have to be the first or the best in the marketplace. Google wasn't the first search engine and XYZ, but ultimately, if you're an entrepreneur, you're serious about growth, you should have time in your diary every week, every month, every quarter, whatever that period looks like, where you are, and I think you call it stargazing or casting that into the future. And, summarize it as blue sky ideas, guys, is what I'm actually saying to you. Put it on there, put some time out there and say, hey, what I'm doing, how can I disrupt the market? How can I bring something to my niche or space that's actually going to deliver something and give me an advantage going forward? So credit to you there. And, ultimately, it's exactly where you should be, especially at the start of this period, understanding technology and, not driving yourself nuts about which way it'll play out, because we don't know. We don't, if it could be a fly on the boardroom of all these tech giants, we'd be a lot further forward than maybe what we are. But the ultimate point is brilliant. I absolutely love the idea. And what I want to ask you is, even though you don't have an idea fully fleshed out, that the apple with the scene playing out and characters jumping off the table, would that be translated into sort of the whiteboard animations that you're doing, or the cartoons, or the customers about us page on the website, or whatever? Just give us an idea of how you think you may be able to use it, as rough sketch as it might be. Just share with us how you think you could use your existing services, so the listeners can think, hey, I know what Michael does across these three things. How would that actually transfer into AR, etc.? So,
for example, at the moment, if you wanted an AR, augmented reality experience, you've got to download a specific app.
Yeah.
Right? Sign up to the app, and then there might be some technology inside the app that will allow you to then view content.
Yeah.
So just to explain to the listeners very briefly, for augmented reality, you need to have a target, right? So if you point your phone, let's say, at a lamppost that's got a QR code on it, you might get some art appearing next to the lamppost, or a message, or somebody speaking to you. And some of this is already being done, right? This is not brand new, but it's just not visible that much.
Yeah, it's not mainstream.
No, but that means you've got to download an app, which means somebody has to do something. So my vision is that actually the camera will already be the app. You don't need to download another app. You'll have a device or some spectacles that you look at the target, and you're going to get what you need coming up. So I would work with my clients to develop the target. What's the target going to be?
Yeah.
So is it a business card? So when people look at the business card,
fantastic.
It's just somebody's going to pop up from the business card and a little cartoon pops up to speak to you. Or is it going to be a brochure that might be just one page, but people look at it and all of a sudden it becomes a much bigger thing, and people are talking to you. There may be cartoons, there may be real people, doesn't matter, right? So, but maybe I'm not even thinking too advanced even, I've got to perhaps get my thinking out even further, more futuristic. But I know, I kind of have this feeling inside of me that something's going to happen big in this area.
Yeah.
And I really want to be part of it fairly early on.
Brilliant.
Because in the past, Mike, I've seen stuff the way it's going to go, and I've missed the boat. I haven't backed it fully. I haven't gone, I'm going to go all in with this. So although I'm not like spending a fortune on this, what I am doing is I'm already speaking to like universities, getting some support from them. And I've started that process, and whilst just starting that process and you've got your goal, you've got a bit of a vision, things start coming to you. And what I found is that people are coming out of the woodwork that might be able to help me in the future with it.
Yeah, there is. There's a great saying, and credit to Brad Martineau over at 6th Division in Arizona for this. It's not one that I own, but I use it quite often, and that is the map appears when the car's in motion. And I think that's a great saying for entrepreneurs, that you can sit on the side saying, hey, I haven't really got it all figured out. Well, you never will when you sat on the wall. Get off the wall, start moving forward. Yeah. Left turns, right turns, no entry signs, hills up and down, rivers, valleys will appear. And some of those are opportunities, some of those are obstacles and challenges that we have to face. But that's how products are done. Products are never built finished on a whiteboard or a wireframe. They're built with real life examples, because I don't care how clever you are, what development budget they've got, Apple included. They don't finish it. They build a prototype or a beta model and they push it out, and then they think, and they've spent sometimes hundreds of millions on product development, and then they go, hey, why did we miss this? And I'm not saying it's as simple as the on button or anything like that, but there's something always obvious that comes out of the prototype. But no, that's awesome. If you've got if there's any listeners out there in and around the AR space, PR space, AR space, you want to connect with Michael, you can do that. Head over to stayingaliveuk.com, search Michael de Groot, or de Groot, should I say. You got it there with the pronunciation on LinkedIn. We'll put the links below in the show notes, of course. So as a fellow podcaster, tell us a little bit about the show, and I know you're a co-host of others as well, and where people can listen, Michael.
So, yeah, we briefly touched on it, so I won't spend too much time on it, but Share Your Story essentially is talking to other smaller business owners and finding out about their journey. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what it is, and it inspires people to get off their chair and do something else, and in their lives. Also, it's helpful for existing business owners too, because they may hear tips and techniques and ideas that they haven't adopted before. So it's for that market too. The other podcast that we started, which is very, very new, we've only done a few shows, is called Story of a Speech. Yeah. And essentially, I work together with a executive coach who teaches people how to become better speakers. Yeah. And of course, I'm the storyteller. That's why it's called Story of a Speech. Yeah. So, and in our initial kind of first series, we've done a little bit of analysis in terms of saying, what is a story? What is a speech? What's the difference? But then also we've looked at some great speeches within some movies, and we've kind of analyzed them and kind of saying what's specific about these speeches.
So real life examples, which people can associate with. Fantastic.
And that people are familiar with, So so that's what we've done. So we will be doing more of that in 2020, and it's still a fairly new show, but we're enjoying the process. But like you said earlier, we know we've made some mistakes, and this is the first time where we're working together. I'm working in conjunction with somebody else. Yeah. Which is a different energy. It's a different
dynamic, isn't it?
Yeah, different things you've got to learn. Who speaks first, and you kind of put each other on the spot and go, I don't know what to say.
The good thing is the best ones are always done, and we bounce off script all the time, and it's like, oh gosh, and it is, because if it's, even though we have a show book, we have a show format, all the shows follow a similar type of way. The authenticity of it, so to say, it comes out with just picking up and living in the moment, and if it's relevant to the conversation and there's value for the audience. I think, we've probably got 10 or 15 sort of stages in our podcast process, from opening to closing the show. But it probably ends up being 25 every time, because we veer off all the time, and, it's just relative, and it'd be a crime to leave it out in some cases.
Well, that's exactly where we're at the moment. So in the first few shows, we've been doing living in the moment, and we've now recognized that actually when we do this, there is a fairly similar format, so we need to put a bit of preparation and structure around it. And that's the next step that we've got to do. So being very honest, we haven't got it sorted yet.
So head over and give it a listen. We'll put the link below, Story of a Speech. Give that a listen and give him a follow and a review. It helps us as podcasters. It motivates us that actually we're being listened to. Not that it's ego or anything like that, but go and give Michael and his team a follow there. As we wrap out of your bio and your background, and I really enjoyed learning more about you, Michael, is one thing that's really close to my own heart is, as entrepreneurs, it's often, our focus is to grow, to create opportunity, wealth or service or whatever it may be. But sometimes a lot of entrepreneurs I see out there miss giving back to the community. And if 2020 is a goal for you giving back, I mean, I'm a mentor for Doncaster 100 Council. I've worked with HSBC Young Enterprise. We have our own community here in our agency. And I get a lot of pleasure in giving back to good causes. And I know you share similar sort of traits around that, Michael. So outside of your professional career, just tell us a little bit more about the volunteering and things that you give back to the community. It's a great shout.
Thank you. So, it wasn't until kind of 2004 that I woke up to the fact that volunteering is something that existed. I didn't even know. I was in corporate life and I didn't even know that this existed. So once I heard about it, I became more interested in it. So I did a bit of volunteering for somebody called Tony Robbins. And actually it was his course where I heard about it. So I did some crewing for free. But I also then joined a charity in Africa for a couple of orphanages. And they were in the UK, very, very small, and they were doing some amazing work in Uganda. So I did some volunteering there, but I had to move physically away, so I couldn't continue. And then I did some volunteering locally for a hospice for a few years. And I finished that. It kind of came to its logical end. And then something I've always been passionate about is homelessness. And
big problem in the UK at the moment.
Pardon?
It's a big problem, isn't it, in the UK, the inner cities? Well, not just inner cities, but it's more evident there for sure. When we go into our agency in Leeds, it's horrific, And,
and it's not just people sleeping rough or on the street or begging. That's just one tiny part of it. There are hundreds of thousands of people that are homeless. They may have a roof over their head, but they haven't got a place that they can call home.
Yeah, it's a big issue.
And it starts at a very young age, and it's really just a horrible place to be. So I found an organization. There are many very, very good charities around the country, but I found an organization called Crisis in Birmingham. And Crisis are a national charity. They started about 50 years ago when the problem really started to get very big, and some people in government set Crisis up. And it was really Crisis at Christmas is what launched first of all. And now it's a big thing. It's the biggest volunteering event in Europe every single year. And, but it's only a tiny part of the process. They do a lot of good work. Now, actually, I got a tiny bit of news on it because I've actually finished volunteering with Crisis at the end of last year. I've done about 3 years with them. And I've learned a huge amount about the kind of homelessness sector and all of the issues around it. I mean, there are loads more that I don't know about, but I would say my knowledge has gone up by at least 50% from where it was. So my plan now is to still stay in the homelessness sector and do something more local to where I live. To go into Birmingham is about like an hour on the train, whatever. So I want to do something more local to where I am. But also I met some people, as you do when you're working in that sector, who are doing some amazing things. There's a chap called Richard Layton who does some work, incidentally, for kind of entrepreneurs in the enterprise in Birmingham City University. And he has an amazing idea and project to convert pubs to homes or flats. There are hundreds of thousands of empty pubs that can be converted to housing.
It's amazing.
But also not just housing, also have shops at the bottom that they can work in, that people can work in, but also learn about themselves and support and all of that. So I might do some work with him. So it's kind of a moving target at the moment, but I know that I will continue volunteering in the homeless sector to really, do my bit of campaigning, whether it be to my local MP, to the government, some tweeting, and obviously any research information. Crisis are brilliant at pulling together all the research and information. I've got a very short blog with loads of links on my website, that if people want to learn more about the topic and all of the different facets of it, they can help themselves.
Yeah, well, please do send us that link, and we'll tag it to this blog, because as you know, the Open Mic podcast will turn into a blog, and then obviously that'll get distributed out. So send us that. Also send us any links to Crisis or anything like that. We'll be more than happy to push those in and give them a push and some support.
Thank you.
And good on you as well, because it's great that, sometimes, you can't always continue with one specific charity. They're all good. They all have best intentions, but, the fact that you're committed to it. And for the listeners out there, if 2020 is your year where you're going to start giving back and you've not quite got off the settee with that yet because you've had other priorities, whether it's fitness or business, just do it. Schedule an hour out this weekend or through the week. Look up on your local charities. For me, my charities are all about children. NSPCC is my charity that I support.
Right.
For underprivileged kids and things like that. That's the part. You've got the homeless sort of angle to it. I have the underprivileged kids. Whatever's important to you, go out, just do it. And do you know what? I get more pleasure and more satisfaction out of donating and seeing the direct debit going out of my bank account every month when it says NSPCC on there than I do anything else. And when you get involved with things like the Young Enterprise Scheme for HSBC, going into sixth form colleges, helping kids in the business sector to set up, run, and then shut down a business, and that's the program that does there. It's you get such a feeling for it, and I actually look forward to it. And sometimes better than some of the boring business meetings, dare I say, that none of the clients that I work with are boring to a degree, that some of the meetings get a little bit strained, as you know. But no, that's absolutely great. As I say, we'll get that supported. Make sure that's an initiative if that's something that you want to do. And drop me a message. Use the hashtag #TheOpenMic. I'd love to know what you're supporting. We'll give them a push and a bounce out to our channels as well. And we'll do that from there. So appreciate sharing the backstory. That's amazing. Let's get into this topic of storytelling. It's how we opened up the show. You know a little bit more about Michael now, what's important to him. But what we're going to get down to now is something a little bit more scientific, a little bit more detailed, and some practical, actionable tips. And to kick that out and get it framed up, Michael, the listeners, how can they understand the difference between storytelling, in most of the adverts that are out there versus how the movie business does it? Just tell us a little bit more about that.
So I often, when I do any speaking about storytelling or any workshops, I ask the audience, I said, who likes the adverts? Right? That's my first question. And there might be one or two hands go up, and those are usually the people that are in the business of creating ads, right? Yeah. Most people don't put their hands up, and that's really interesting. I mean, some people go, yeah, I love the ads, but some people go, no, I don't want to watch the ads. They're an interruption, right? I said, well, the second question is, who's ever been to the movies? And all the hands go up, right? Okay, so what is the difference? So adverts are interruptions to our day-to-day activities. We're watching a program and an ad comes up and it's like in your face, this is the product, buy us. Now, don't get me wrong. Some ads are stories in their own right. Most of them are not, but there are some. And even the ad business now are changing. And this started off some years ago. I'm sure we will remember at Christmas time, which is the advert that we all look out for now, which is the company, Mike?
Yeah, it's the John Lewis.
Absolutely. And the reason the John Lewis advert stands out, because it's a story.
And this year's been really powerful, hasn't it, with the Edgar one? I think it's the one that's maybe taken it up a notch again. And, whether it's the theme tune for us oldies casting back to REO Speedwagon before the modern version or whatever, but, the child and the dragon and it's just come together. And I love all the John Lewis adverts, but I think they really knocked it out of the park this year. It really was striking.
But you can also see the amount of merchandise that can be sold on the back of that with the dragon, right? I mean, the Elton John one the previous year was a piano. Well, not many kids were going to get a piano for Christmas, were they? Quite frankly, but lots of people got dragons, I'm sure.
Yeah, and books. We got our nieces and nephews exactly that. We got them an Edgar. We got them an Edgar Dragon apiece, and they did a great, colourful illustration hardback book, John Lewis, which actually told the story of the advert. You know, how obviously he got excited, and then all the way through to being, whether it was accepted again or pleased again by lighting the Christmas pudding type of thing. But it was a great illustration book. Fantastic.
Yeah, and there were very many hidden messages in that book, in the advert, right? In the story, because it was there are kids that could relate to an Edgar, you know, even the flames that disrupted everything, you know, there are kids that do that as well. They could go, you know, I'm an Edgar, really, I behave like that, or other reasons, saying, oh, I really feel sorry for Edgar, the dragon. Look at him, he's on his own, you know, nobody loves him, and he just wants to be loved, he wants to be part of it. And there were so many hidden messages. I mean, whoever wrote that did a really fabulous job.
Yeah, no kidding.
So that's when I talk about adverts and movies, that's the difference. So when you go to movies in the cinema, I always say to people, you are now sitting in a dark room for 3 hours, right? The Irishman, if anybody knows about that one on Netflix, was also in the cinema. I mean, that's 3 hours. Who wants to sit through a movie for 3 hours, eat popcorn and chocolate and Coke and whatever, spend a fortune, right, to be entertained, to lose themselves in the story, because they know they're going to be entertained and they're going to be able to lose themselves. No one's going to say, right, let's put 3 hours of adverts on. I'm going to lose myself in the adverts, you know.
It's true, and it's a disconnect, isn't it, with the movies? Because, you know, when you go there, it does, you know, and, you know, for those having, you know, a difficult time, sometimes it's an escape, and you know, you become a superhero for 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever. And, you know, then you go out and, you know, it's like anything, it wears off. You know, you stop talking about the story or the plot, and then you realize that, you know, you're still back in the situation. But you cannot be 24/7, you know, looking at problems, you know, and sometimes getting away, detoxing, recharging, hooking yourself into a movie is a great way to do that, isn't it? And, you know, you become somebody else for that. It's all your problems are forgotten for those couple of hours or so, isn't it? And I think that's a great why. And me and my wife, you know, if we've got some problems, not necessarily personally, but, you know, in our business, in our lives, you know, going to the movies, it's sometimes more of an escape, because it's permission not to talk. It's just to sort of chill out, disconnect, forget about it. And you do. And then what you do is you buy into that story, don't you? And assuming it's a good movie, then, you know, you do that type of thing.
But it's more than that. It's more than that escapism.
Yeah.
We have all been conditioned to stories from a very, very young age. The conditioning part happens when you're, I don't know, 2 years old, 3 years old. When your folks are telling you stories, that's when it starts to kind of, you know, our neurons get conditioned to stories. All communication are stories.
Yeah.
All communication are stories, right? Apart from saying yes and no, most of the time when business people meet, they share a story with each other. They go, what do you do? It's actually not the great question.
No, not the best question.
That's for another podcast. But they want to know they want to know your story. They don't say, oh, tell me your story. Well, I do, but not everybody says that. But that's a better question to ask. Yeah. Because we're curious, we want to know the story, and that's how communication actually takes place.
Yeah.
Equally, when you read books, I always say to people, where are the images inside books that are only filled with text? Where are they, Mike?
Are you talking to, I don't know. It's
they're in your head.
Sorry, apologies. You were talking about the association. Sorry. Yeah, I get it.
So all the images are in your head, right? You create them. So even when you're watching a movie, you are creating new images in your head.
You're overtyping
you're relating
overwriting it. Yeah, I get
Yeah,
that. Sorry, I was slightly off track there with the question, but yeah, okay. I understand it.
I trick questions. I know you're supposed to be asking the questions.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Keep me on my toes. It's an early start to 2020 in the podcast.
I want to make sure you're listening, Mike.
Oh, it's the feedback loop. Yeah, getting that going. Yeah, but
because sure. we are making up stuff in our brain all the time.
We are.
You know, I have this saying that most stories are created in fear and doubt.
Yeah.
That's a program we're running all the time. Fear and doubt, all the thing. I don't know if you saw that Twitter lit up after tiny bit of politics, after this general in Iran was killed, right?
Yeah.
Twitter lit up with World War III. Yeah. Everybody went straight to World War III, fear and doubt.
Yep.
So all the stories were being created around fear and doubt. All the programs, Jeremy Vine on Radio 2, you know, are we going to get into World War? You know, what's going to happen, people? So the media putting us all into fear and doubt, all through the method of storytelling.
Yeah.
When you watch a movie, the only reason you watch it from beginning to end, because the writers, the script writers, are putting you into fear and doubt all the way along.
That's great. And I appreciate you clearing that. And I think that sort of segues nice into the next question. You talk about the movie script writers, Michael. Yeah. There's a framework to a story. Now, for those who are familiar with this, that's fine. There's some additional sort of strategies you can top up on. But for those who are learning this really for the first time, there is a specific framework. You know, used to be called a story arch, or there's various other things that talk around that. So from your expert sort of viewpoint, Michael, tell us what the framework of a story is and how this is built up.
There are many around, and it depends what people, you know, relate to the most. But the very, very basic one that everybody needs to keep an eye on are 4 areas.
Yeah.
Area number 1 is relatability.
Yeah.
So people need to be able to relate to the story. They need to be able to feel something that they can understand. You know, if you make it too obscure and you can't really get hold of the story yourself, you can't relate to it, you can't see yourself in the character, then you're going to lose the audience, right? Yeah. The second area, there needs to be some novelty, right? Okay. It has to be novel enough for people to go, oh, this is new. Yeah. You know, so the John Lewis advert wasn't number 2 from last year. It wasn't Elton John number 2. It was something completely novel, but the story kind of feeling of it was still an advert. Yeah. We knew it was John Lewis. We could relate to it. We could relate to Edgar. We could relate to the girl. We could relate to, you know, the people around the table. We could relate to all of those things, but it was also novel.
Yeah.
The next one is tension. Now, to keep your attention, we need to give you some tension. It has to feel like something is about to happen here. It's all going to go wrong. I've got to keep watching to see what happens next.
Because we're curious minds, aren't we, as human beings?
But because we have gone into that character, we're kind of willing them on. We know who the baddies are. We know who the good ones are. We're kind of going, come on, you can do this, you know. And then the last one, number 4, is fluency. Now, fluency means it has to flow in a way that makes it, you know, comfortable. You're going to sit there and know something else is going to happen. Yeah. It's not going to be jarred in some way. I mean, some people, there was a series, I don't think it's finished yet, about, what's his name? I forget his name now. Anyway, let's say it's a series about a famous politician who had an affair. Yeah. What's his name?
Profumo, John Profumo.
Profumo.
The Profumo affair. Right? Yeah, that's right.
There were loads of messages on Twitter complaining that they kept going back to a year earlier, right? Without any kind of warning. So they kept switching backwards and forwards. That was very jarring on the fluency of the story. Yeah. Now, you could argue actually it adds a bit of spice to it, and it's clever writing to go back, because often that does happen. But to some people, it was jarring. There was no fluency. Just stick with current time wherever you are. Yeah. Don't keep going backwards and forwards. It's very confusing. You know, I don't know where I am anymore, because likely people would have been watching their phone and then look back and go, oh, where are they now?
Yeah. The first time I saw that, really, and I'm probably outdated with it, but the first time I saw that was Lost. You know, I don't remember the TV show series Lost on Sky, where they kept going back to previous lives before the plane crash, and then all sorts of. Yeah. And we did get lost. You know, we did get with it. But I suppose it became a cult series in the end, as people bought into that as the first way. But I do agree, it's not a critique against what you say. I think people do need the fluency. But I just wondered, what's your take on programs like Lost? And I think there was a new program that came out this summer last year as well, called Manifest on Sky, where the plane they took off from one airport and then landed another, but they got lost 5 years in the middle, and then they kept going back and forward. And they seem to be becoming a little bit more popular. Do you think there's a place for that, or have they got to be so outstandingly unique? Or, you know, what's your take on those type of programs?
So when it came out first, you got lost, right? So if the next one comes out and it does the same thing, you can now know what's going to happen. Yeah. Right. So you've got an expectation. There's got to be still some novelty in there. So a new name, a new story, a new plot, or whatever. But a similar thing's going to happen going backwards and forwards. You now know what's going to happen.
Yeah. You either like that thing or you don't, I suppose, is what we say.
Well, it's about education. So what storytellers are doing, they're trying to educate you as to this is the way it's going to go. So get used to it. It's a bit like novel. It's a bit new. Sometimes you can lose the audience. And a good example of this is Star Wars. Yeah. You had
totally confused. Yeah.
Yeah. The prequels that came out had too much change in it, right? So when it went to Disney, they went back to the old format and effectively replicated the original movie. Yeah. And the last one very much is full of nods to the original movie. And by the way, that was the year I came to the UK, and I queued around the corner, London, Leicester Square Theatre, Odeon Leicester Square, not knowing whether I would get a ticket or not. Yeah. The queue was that long. I got in and it was amazing, but those were the times, Mike, of having to queue for cinema tickets.
I remember when our screen in Barnsley, where I originally grew up in South Yorkshire, had one screen, and you used to queue out on Eldon Street, round the corner and up the arcade. And that's just what it was. And if you were close to the cinema, you had the cover of the canopy. If you didn't and it was raining, then you got wet there and you were munching on your popcorn, drenched type of thing. And they were the days, weren't there? And none of these multiplexes or 60 different screens or showings. But how times moved on, but all for the better, of course. But I remember it, and actually Star Wars, it was the first film I ever went to see myself. So
wow.
My mother took me. It's the first cinema experience I ever had. And
brilliant.
Don't remember too much about it, but
no.
It's certainly there. So something there in common.
So you can lose an audience if it's too novel. You can't relate to it. It hasn't got fluency. It's too jarring. There's not enough tension in it. Those are the four areas we talked about.
Yeah, and you mentioned there certainly about the tension side. I mean, we've all been on, especially some of the series, doesn't it? They leave us on cliffhangers that last in this episode, and then they leave us in this shock horror situation because season 2 or 3 or episode 4 or 5 is coming next door. So, we're all curious-minded and that tension. Talking about the next stage of that, Mike, how that flows through, that attention plus tension equals, a tension. I know we've covered it a little bit more there, but just can you dig it a little bit deeper for us there? Yeah. So attention plus tension is A dot tension. Explain more about that.
Yeah, so this is a made up word by me. Tension, TENSION. S-I-O-N.
Got it.
It's really to kind of say to people, if you want a story where you're going to get people's attention, you need to build in tension.
Got it.
Right? And that tension often, the way that movies, stories repeat itself, even in the tiny little advert by John Lewis about the Edgar the Dragon, right? There was tension in there because where they go is what is and what could be.
Yeah.
Right? So you keep repeating that. What is, what could be. What is, what could be. What is, what could be. Sorry to repeat it, but that's essentially what you've got to do. You've got to say, you know, Edgar the Dragon, you know, just wants to go and play on the ice with everybody. But in his excitement, he melts the ice because of his, you know, flame throwing out of his nose. And then, so that's what is, what could be. He could be fine playing with the kids. And then the next scene, the same thing happens, burns the Christmas tree or whatever, you know. And then the next scene, so it's what is, what could be. What is, what could be. And then he comes into the room and goes, oh my God, you know, what's he going to do now?
And everybody ducks for cover, don't they? They think they're going to burn all the Christmas table.
That's right. But somebody, some mentor, some kind of person has come along and saved him and helped him on his journey and gave him the solution so that he doesn't have to burn everybody, you know, and he can be part of, you know, I mean, it's great storytelling. It's exactly the way you've got to go. So it's what is, what could be. So you're building tension all along that journey until finally you get over the line, you know, you save the day, or you save the person.
And that's what happens in the movies as well, Michael, isn't it? You know, the hero, you know, has some atrocity done to him, you know, somebody's, you know, some thing to do with his family or whatever. And he goes on a revenge journey, or he gets wrongly convicted and he goes on a mission to clear his name, and eventually hopefully comes out at the end of that, doesn't it? It's that type of thing, isn't it, that you're talking about there? Yeah.
You got it.
Spot on. And I suppose what I want to drill you down on, Michael, if I could, I really enjoyed listening about the what is, what could be example. So if we've got an entrepreneur out there at the moment who's thinking, okay, I need to include story in my marketing, my advertising, call it whatever you would do, campaigns. Could you break that down? And we've got a saying here on the Oak Mic, it's what we call fifth grade level. So, you know, on simplest level that, you know, anybody at fifth grade level could understand. And it's no disrespect to his audience. It's just the simpler it is, the easier it is to understand and apply. So in a fifth grade level, I'm looking at putting a campaign together. I'm looking to put an advert together. I'm looking to put a brochure or a story or a campaign or whatever. The medium is irrelevant, really. Could you give me a couple of examples of how the listeners could say, right, here's the what is part, and here's what there could be in, you know, it could be in any business, a plumber, it could be a shopkeeper, it could be a solicitor. It doesn't really matter. Any example that you've got where we transfuse this this idea about what is, what could be into practical deliverables. Could you just share maybe something that the audience could understand?
So the first place is to understand what the problem is, the challenge. What is the challenge that the client has to overcome that you can solve for them? You can be the mentor, the advisor, the product, the service that can help them with their challenge. There's got to be a problem, hasn't there?
Of course.
Because otherwise no one is interested.
Yeah. Or an aspiration, I suppose. You want to be better at something or whatever, maybe learn a language or whatever, but it's still a problem because I don't know how to speak the language. You know, I get that, but sometimes it's aspirational, I think, as well, isn't it? So it's not, we're not just, you know, 999 blue light solving here, but, you know, along the way, it is a challenge, it's a problem, it's an obstacle, it's whatever, Got it.
So you begin with articulating that problem in a story format. You say, Mike, you know, is looking to get, let's say, I don't know,
lose 30 pounds.
Well, we won't go into the weight thing. Well, let's say Mike needs to get his podcast listened to millions of people around the world, right? Or whatever. If he doesn't, then this is what happens to him. You know, he's going to feel very, I'm not saying this is going to happen, this is fiction, Mike, is going to get very depressed, and then you say, well, what else could happen, if he doesn't get listened to by millions of people? Well, he could give up the podcast, right? Well, what else could happen if he's going to give up the podcast? What's that going to happen? Well, he's going to close his business.
Yeah.
Oh my God, all of these things. So you looking at the story or reading the story or watching it or goes, I can see myself, that's me in that story. I'm a Mike, if I don't do these things, that's what's going to happen. I'm going to close my business as well.
So it's a consequential damage as well, at multiple levels, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's kind of future pacing it. So what's the challenge? If you don't fix it, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Right. Or what are all the things that are happening to you right now as a consequence of that challenge not being solved? And then at the very end, you give them the solution, right? Yeah. You say, I'm here to solve your challenge or your problem.
Yeah.
I am the only person who can do this. Now, the tendency is to go and tell them what the solution is, right? That's too much.
Yeah.
We got to leave something to the imagination. We've got to say, just get in touch now, because I can solve your problem. Because as business owner, the outcome we want is people to get in touch with us.
Yeah, it's conversion of some point, isn't it? From strangers to inquirer or prospect. Yeah,
absolutely. That's what we want, because once you've got them communicating, you can then go, right, what's your problem and challenge? Let's get into the meat of it. Then it's time to give them the solution.
Yeah, and often as well, you'll find, to the listeners, when you're speaking to potential prospects, the reason that they actually give you is really, it's more surface, isn't it? It's never, there's always a real or more damning reason beneath that. And I know when we do a lot of sales work and sales enablement work with sales teams in our agency, the sales teams sometimes say, well, the customer said, or the prospect said this. Yeah. But what is he really saying? And sometimes you get blank faces. Sometimes you get the light bulb going, well, what is he actually saying? And it's exactly what you're saying here. If I don't get my show listened to, do I get demotivated? Do I give up? Or whatever that might be. And that's a real sort of challenge for sales teams to get the real reason. And sometimes customers just don't, or prospects just don't want to tell you because they're embarrassed. I'm open. I know I used the example earlier about weight loss. I put a bit of weight on last year and I really could do with losing it. And then I could do with losing 30 pounds, and get back to my ideal weight. And that's a goal for me this year. But not everybody will go to the gym and say, hey, I'm a little bit overweight, I need to lose 30 pounds, can you help me? Others will just say, I'll go, and I feel a bit awkward, or figure it out for yourself. So learn to ask a lot better questions, learn to dig deep and find out the real reason. I suppose slightly off topic there, Michael, but I just wanted to make sure the listeners understand it, that what I'm trying to say is that sometimes what the customer is telling you is not always the real reason.
No, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and you can, if you're unsure about that, drop us a message on the hashtag the open mic, and again we'll point to some blogs or some examples about that. But no, I get that, and the what is, what could be. One thing I picked up on that, which I've learned something new. I always do on these shows, so thanks for sharing. Is yes. Don't tell them everything. Leave that suspense. I suppose what we are saying is tell them enough so they can connect and see that future vision. But don't tell them everything, because otherwise, if you give them everything, then ultimately, why on earth would they make that inquiry with you? I suppose it is ultimately what we're saying. So yeah, I get that. That's fabulous guidance there. Now, you use a terminology, and I love this. I'm sort of half-baked, if that makes sense, on this sort of topic. Use the terminology, the hero's journey. Now, for those who have not come across that before, what does the hero's journey actually mean, Michael?
Well, it's... You mentioned story arc earlier.
Yeah, I did. That's just my old-fashioned way of doing things.
So I'll read this out, okay? So we start in an ordinary world. A humble character gets called to adventure and initially refuses, but meets a wise mentor who trains them and convinces them to go on said adventure. They are then tested. They meet allies and they make enemies. They approach a final battle and almost lose it, but eventually find it within themselves to succeed. They return home to an appropriate hero's welcome, transformed by the journey.
Interesting.
Now,
Avengers Endgame there comes to
correct,
mind.
Correct. But did you know that the original Star Wars, George Lucas came across a guy who invented the hero's journey called Joseph Campbell?
Yes, yep. I'm aware of Joseph Campbell
was inspired by all the Greek myths, the mythology, Greek mythology that had these stories in there already. So this is not new. This has been in existence for many, many years. But Joseph Campbell made it more accessible to scriptwriters and movie makers.
Yeah.
And George Lucas, after he'd written Star Wars, the first Star Wars, which was episode whatever.
3, 5.
But,
I don't know.
Yeah, whatever. I can see the V and then another 1 or 2.
Yeah, I have no idea. No idea. No. You talked about getting lost earlier. I definitely got lost with that. To me, it's Star Wars, it's Empire Strikes Back, and it's Return of the Jedi. And the rest of them, there's any Star Wars fans out there, please don't hammer me. But, there's only 3 Star Wars films in my mind. But
Well, he rewrote the original Star Wars after he came across Joseph Campbell.
Right.
And it literally has that story arc in it.
Yeah.
Where, Luke Skywalker was very reluctant, but his uncle and aunt died, so he had to go.
Yeah.
And, he was helped along the way by Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda. Whatever, to train him into the Jedi that he then became, right? And he won the day. So, but along that journey, he was killed many times over, but didn't quite get killed, but other people did. And so all movies up until that point were not along that kind of storyline, right?
But today they are, aren't they? You can see that, whether you're looking at the Jack Ryan type of series, the Mission Impossibles, and, whatever, even Indiana Jones to a degree. And that was early on, wasn't it, in the 80s and things like that. You can see that, and, where they have that reluctance, they get involved, they meet somebody along the way, they have enemies, and, somebody's had to either catch them or kill them.
I have a question then, Mike. Why don't we get bored of it?
Yeah, we don't do it because I think, is it the relatability factor that's where we are in life itself, or is it the fact that we expect that? I don't know. I suppose I don't like answering questions with questions, but does the majority of the general public, certainly the movie-paying public, do they actually even know that there's this psychology of a framework behind it? Or do they just go and say, hey, I'm now going to watch Captain America beat up Iron Man in Civil War, or vice versa, whoever won? Or I think nobody won. It was a bit of a draw on the airfield, wasn't it, at the end? But
it's very simple. The answer to that question is really, really simple.
Yeah.
And it is your story.
Yeah.
You're watching your story. Every single human being walking on this planet has a story about themselves.
Yeah.
They have challenges they have to overcome. They have mentors. They have allies.
Enemies.
They are heroes in their own lives.
Yeah.
They are heroes to their children, to their parents, to their colleagues in some way. It's our story that we're watching over and over and over and over. But we are then portrayed in different characters, walking in different uniforms, male and female. It really doesn't matter. Or fictitious characters as cartoons as well.
Absolutely. It doesn't even have to be real. I mean, one of the cartoons that I grew up with, although it was filmed before my time, but as a young kid, was the Wacky Races. I used to love the Wacky Races in cartoons. And those people, as daft as it sounds, were real to me. Hong Kong Phooey, that Hanna-Barbera era, they people were real to me. And even though they were, fictitious drawings and animated flick books, really, weren't they? Really?
For me, it was the Flintstones.
Yeah, again, equally, Yeah, and it's
they
the
were
same
very
thing.
real to me.
Yeah, and you didn't treat them as cartoons. And as it wouldn't go amiss. I know we'll get some comments if we don't mention it, but the ultimate one is obviously over modern times is The Simpsons, isn't it?
Yes.
And what is that? It's season 30 or something ridiculous.
Unbelievable.
Like that.
Yeah.
You know how they've taken that, and especially because we talked about political and religious and prejudice. How we always try to tiptoe through those subjects on the show, just so we don't we try to keep a neutral audience. But the amount of suppression, prejudice, criminal activities, racial prejudice, domestic prejudice that goes off in The Simpsons. It's bizarre
everything. It's got everything.
It is so diverse. But I think I'm trying to back up what you're saying there, Michael, about being the story that whether you believe you're Homer Simpson or you believe that you're the suppressed Marge or frustrated Marge or you're the criminal gang of Fat Tony there or Mo in the bar, which is crazy goings off there, all sorts, and Barney, and then there's a Pooh gets so much abuse in the shop, and in today's area, don't get me wrong, I just want to be clear, guys, I'm not condoning or anything, but I'm just saying is how they treat him, as this sort of Asian shopkeeper with a petrol pump and that, you think, and I know there is a case to move that out, that sort of character and that sort of thing, but it makes you wonder how it's not being called out maybe more aggressive, because in today's politically correct world, and again I'm not condoning or agreeing with anything, I just want to be clear about that, guys, is that show, you're right, it's everyday life, I think, is what I'm getting to, Michael, isn't it?
Yes.
Maybe exaggerated and things like that, but it comes to life that way, and how it runs for 30 plus years and outsells and sells and sells. And not only did they make a movie, I think it was 2008-9, I think they're bringing another Simpsons movie out as well. So that franchise in its own right has been probably one of the ones that we accept that has been wildly successful, despite that diversity and prejudice that sometimes is in there. So I do get it. And I do love the point that whatever your story, as Michael said, it is your story. Whatever story that you're dealing with, deal with it. Live it. And, I suppose from an entrepreneur's point of view, don't quit, work it out, figure it out, get better at it, find out how to provide more value, find out how to, deliver great services, and whether that's blue sky thinking like Michael's doing in the AR space or whatever, it doesn't really matter, but live your story. And if you want to share your story with us, use the hashtag #TheOpenMic. We'll get that looked at. If you don't want to share it publicly, shoot me a private message. You can get with me on LinkedIn, or you can do that through Twitter. So that's great. I love that idea. And as we wrap out of the show, I know we've touched on the brain and the psychological of buying decisions earlier, Michael, but tell us a little bit more about how storytelling affects the brain for us to make decisions, which ultimately, for us entrepreneurs, if we can get storytelling better or get better at storytelling and bring this into our marketing and our business and our team's communication, then that can positively, or I suppose negatively if you don't do it, affect the way your customers potentially buy. So talk to us a little bit more about that neuroscience or the areas around that how storytelling affects the buying decision of the customers. Okay,
so I normally things are in threes to help people remember, but this is in fours again. So the first area is something called neurocoupling.
Yeah.
So where a story affects parts or activates parts in the brain that allows the listener to turn the story into their own ideas and experiences, thanks to a process called neurocoupling.
Yeah.
So you've already got neurons in your brain that have certain parameter stories from what has happened to you in your life previously. So if you hear somebody else's story, you've got to make sense of it, or watch a story, you've got to make sense of it and put it into your own language. So your brain goes and finds your own stories and then attaches those new information to that, brings it forward and kind of goes, look, that bit of new story you've got, you've already experienced this previously, so now you can make sense of it, right? A really important part of making sense of what a story is.
Yep.
The other one is mirroring. By the way, this has all been researched. There are scientific papers around this, so this is not me making it up or somebody else making it up.
So this is like a mirror neurons sort of example.
Yeah, the mirror neurons. Yeah. So what happens is you're mirroring to what's going on for that individual.
Yeah.
Right. So you will experience similar brain activity to each other, including the speaker. So to a degree, we've been doing that even we're just kind of talking to each other, sharing stories, you know, we're experiencing similar activity in our brain, the mirror neuron, as you said. The other one linked to that is the cortex activity. And this is the same happens when you visualize, right? So they've done research on this, you know, the simple way to explain this, that if you wired up an athlete sitting in a chair with brain sensors on his head or her head, and you got them to imagine that they are running a 100-meter race, the brain and the muscles fire based on what they're doing in their brain, just visualizing it, right?
Amazing.
And therefore, when you watch a movie, sometimes you can walk out of the cinema exhausted, but you've sat in a chair doing nothing apart from eating popcorn, right? I'm not saying the popcorn's made you exhausted, but you kind of going, whoa, I've just been on a roller coaster ride in that movie. You know, that was so exciting.
Does that work for tension as well? You know, like you see these crime thrillers where you know, the terminology is you're at the edge of your seat, you're biting your nails, but you feel exhausted afterwards. You think, God, I'm glad it's over. You know, is that the same sort of example? Yeah,
your physical body takes part. Although you're sitting, your things are firing all in your brain as if you're literally... You're running, you're cycling, you're racing in the car, you're doing all of those things with them, you know. And the last one, and most people will be familiar with this, is dopamine.
Yeah.
The kind of pleasure chemical in the brain. You know, and dopamine, when there is an emotionally charged event that takes place. So, you know, when you're watching Edgar, emotion came up, you know, oh, poor Edgar. I mean, a lot of the John Lewis adverts make people cry in lots of ways, you know, and they remember that they cried as well. And that's the thing, an emotionally charged event, dopamine is released into the brain and it kind of solidifies it in the brain. You're going to remember it for years. Because emotion was involved in it.
Yeah, emotion.
So when you do something clever in terms of your marketing and you tell good stories that have emotion in it, and people will remember it forever.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I love that. And just that last line, not to take any value out of the previous 4 points, because there's such an amazing build. But, you know, just tell stories that people remember, you know, and it's one line. It's something I probably put in the blog quote. It's real, you know, we always remember, it doesn't matter what we did when we was younger, maybe a school playground incident. It may be you went on a teenage holiday with the boys or the girls and somebody does something crazy and 20 years later you meet up as a reunion and you say, hey, do you remember when, you know, this event happened or this person did that silly thing. For me, I went on a lad's holiday when I was a late teenager and one of the lads fell off one of those rubber banana sausages in the sea, cracked all his head open. And of course, he didn't have any insurance, and all the lads used to have to club together. And at the time, it cost us, I'm going late 80s here, and he had to, we all had to club in to pay the doctor to stitch his head up. And, you know, and then we always said, we are never going on holiday with him again. I'll keep him nameless just for embarrassment, but we're not going on holiday with him again because he was just a loudmouth. He got into fights. He spilled beer. He did wrong things with girls out there. He fell off the boat, cracked his head open. He was just a disaster. And that's what, 1988, 89, and I can sort of visualize it today. So it's exactly the same. And when we get together, we'll all say, oh, do you remember when? Yeah, we remember when. That cost me so much. And, you know, some of us had more money than others, and we all chipped in to make sure he got his head stitched up right and things like that. And, you know, he had all his hair shaved with iodine all over it. You know, you can be very specific with those memories. So it does work. So if you're in any doubt, what I'm going to challenge you with now is put Michael to to the test, put us to the test. We know it's going to be right, but it'll be fun. Doesn't matter if it's funny, humorous, a little bit sad. If you're comfortable sharing it, send us a message using the hashtag The Open Mic. Tell us something that you always go back to. What is the number one story that you remember? And me and Michael will have a little bit of a chuckle about that when we see that, and it'd be good to learn it. But it's absolutely right. And thank you so much for bringing that memory back as well. I forget how many
You're welcome.
I forget how many pesetas it cost me at the time and what the conversion rate was. I don't know, 200 to the pound or something at the time. But it's absolutely right. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting you on the show, Michael. Thanks for sharing so much value.
Thank you for the time.
So for the listeners, as they're wrapping out of the show, we've talked heavily about storytelling. We've given so many examples. I hope you've had some value. Please connect with Michael, and say thank you, and maybe share with him what is the number one takeaway that you've had out of the show. But just as we wrap out of the show, Michael, could you maybe summarize for the entrepreneur out there who wants to get started with storytelling? Obviously you could connect with Michael and hire his services as well. If that's what you want to do, head over to stayinaliveuk.com. But if they want to get started on themselves, what would be 3 pro tips that they must do to make sure they get started off on the right, format and progress in the right direction? Yeah.
Well, if people are interested, and I really mean that, I've got something called Storytelling Canvas, which breaks that like blocks where they can kind of fill out the information to help them on the journey of creating a story. But the kind of 3 things that I would say that you need to get clarity on to begin with before you even write anything, and that is, what are your clients' pain points? Yeah. What's the story going to be about? It's going to be about their pain points, right? And how can you create more pain as well in the story? Escalate it. So they've got this issue, but if they don't do anything about it, then that's going to happen. If they still don't do anything about it, in 3 years' time, that will happen. So kind of build on it. Number 2, who's the audience that is going to be listening, seeing that story? Be really specific who you're targeting. We are too woolly in, well, it's okay, it's for everybody. No, it's not. Yeah. You can't deal with everybody. It has to be really specific. So who's the audience? You've got to, because then you get clarity on how you're going to shape the story. And then the third thing, what you want to achieve with the story, what's the outcome? And if others heard the story or saw the story, what are they going to be saying about it?
That's good.
What are they going to be sharing to other people? That means, referring you basically based on the story that they've seen or heard. They say, go and check Mike out because he has an amazing story, has an amazing podcast, whatever. You want people to be able to remember it, as we've already talked about. And what you want to achieve, what's the outcome? Do you want them to go online and buy the product or service, or do you want them to pick up the phone and speak to you? Do you want them to become a client? Are you referring them somewhere else? What is the outcome?
Yeah, and that's such good advice, because it's often, I see so many times, we're going to put this social post. I'm like, why? Well, because I need to post something. No, you don't. You don't need to post something. What are you doing it for? Is it a brand awareness? Are you trying to promote something? Are you referring? Are you engaging in somebody else? Why are you doing that? And that's exactly the same in this situation. Yes. You've got to have that end goal, because if you don't have an end goal, you're just going to wander mindlessly. And if you are posting just random, mindless, non-targeted social out there, or email broadcasts, then I would probably bet, and I'm not a betting man, I work too hard for my money, but I would probably bet that the engagement or the conversion is a little bit lower than what it could be if you took Michael's advice and you really focus down on a specific audience, solve one particular problem or multiple problems, and obviously understand the outcome that you want to make. So that's fabulous. The value has been outstanding. It's a fabulous way to start 2020. Thank you. You're so welcome. Much, Michael. And again, if you want to connect with Michael, head over to stayinaliveuk.com. You can follow Michael on Twitter at stayinaliveuk. Connect with him on LinkedIn. And again, don't forget to check out his podcast with /podcast on that domain. We'll put the links below. It's been an absolute pleasure, Michael. It's if I can ever return the favour, let me know. If you want to get me to share my story with your audience.
Yes, please.
I have a bit of a roller coaster one, ups and downs,
please.
Highs of the mountains, lows of the valleys, and lots of scars along the way. And
see, you just proved the point. You just proved the point, Mike. Everyone has a story.
We certainly do. And your story for 2020, I hope it's wildly successful as listeners. Yeah, and you do a fabulous work. I've seen some of the artwork and things like that, so keep it up. And for you as the listeners, we appreciate the time that you're taking to listen to our show. We know you've got a lot of choice in the podcast market and blog market. We appreciate you sticking around. As always, for 2020, go do the hustle, go make it happen, and we're going to catch up with you on another Open Mic podcast next week. God bless, take care, see you soon.
You have been listening to The Open Mic, brought to you by The Success Hub. To find out more and to get the resources we have mentioned in this podcast episode, simply visit blog.thesuccesshub.io and view the podcast section. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to catching up with you in our next episode. This podcast and associated materials is published under copyright to The Success Hub. All rights reserved. No reproduction of this material is permitted.